Welcome to Cricket8.com. This is our podcast. I am Jarrod Kimber. With me is the Rooster, Rob Barron. And of course, we will be talking about cricket stuff. But remember, generally, that's what we do. Actually, sometimes we don't. Last week, I think we talked about my mum meeting the Prime Minister, but mostly about cricket stuff. But remember, you can go to Cricket8.com. You can spin the wheel. You can play the game. And we're ramping back up at Cricket8.com. But we're still just doing this podcast once a week at the moment because it costs a lot of money to make Rob Barron look this good. So
can you imagine
that? Yeah, more than you would expect. I'm assuming. Well, let's just start with Pakistan, England, because I think you have some strong views. My favorite thing about England at the moment is, Rob, that we all have to go on about how attacking they are all the time and talk about it's vibes-based cricket and it's really sexy and it's fun and whatever. And then I have to watch Shoaib Bashir bowl on leg stump and spinning the ball towards leg slip for like 3 hours, and no one seems to go. Actually, a lot of what they do is really boring.
Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of problems with this England setup in Asia, and nothing. I mean, we haven't lost a game yet. It's just a day and a bit into it, but I just don't like it.
Could still win this one. Could still win this one.
Yeah, of course. Pakistan are playing. All results are possible until it's always finished, until it's completely finished. Anyway, my issue here is when England were here a couple of years ago. And it was the barnstorming England of won 2 tests in a row here for the first time in a million years. No one's ever done it, blah, blah, blah. It was amazing, right? It was awesome. And the bats did score, 575 overs in a day? Just to open the series, right? Here we are. Let's have you, right? It was amazing. And that was something that had never happened ever. But to win test matches, you also need bowlers that can do stuff. And if you go back and look at Mark Wood, James Anderson, Ollie Robinson, who can't play now because one of them was told he's not allowed to play anymore. The other one's injured, and the other one eats too many pies. Is essentially what's happened with those 3 people. So they don't.
That was what the ECB press release said.
Pretty much, and then he said you're not allowed to say that I ate too many pies. It's 2022 or whatever. Anyway,
do you know what year we're in?
Guys, all of those guys. We're going at 2 point something and over across the series, right? 2 point something economy. So now we fast forward 2 years of this incredible barnstorming, ripping up the annals of Test cricket. This is how we do it. We do it in all conditions. We're a bunch of lads. Their batting isn't as good anymore as what it was 2 years ago. And now our attack is, and I've talked about this on probably the first podcast we did. Chris Woakes is not your man for away test matches. There's a huge sample size.
Are you sure?
Loads.
I mean,
I'm sure. I'm
maybe
sure.
Just 4 or 5 more away tours and you'll know.
So it's definitely not Chris Woakes. I understand. So they have a guy, right? There's so many things that annoy me about this. So Gus Atkinson, probably not the answer, but you can't ignore what he did, getting on all 3 honours boards at Lords within his first 15 minutes of playing cricket. Fine, he's kind of got to play. Mark Wood injured. I'm not saying that Mark Wood's injuries are the ECB's fault. A lot of cricketers that have been injured for England, Jofra Archer, that is the ECB's fault. So we could have a really good attack. But given what we've got, 2 things really wrong about James Anderson and his part in this. Number one, he should still be playing. And how good is he in these conditions where you must bowl dry and then you can use all that experience to get a bit of reverse if there is any? James Anderson, in the last 5 years of his career, which he got told that he had to stop, was amazing when conditions were horrible for bowling at just bowling dry, and that builds pressure for everybody else, so everyone else can get his wickets. Then they say, you're not allowed to play anymore, Jimmy. It's time to go. And he wasn't happy about it, but he did, and he went, and fair enough. And then Atkinson comes in and gets 7 wickets every match, so that's fine. But then you go to Pakistan. James Anderson is now, we've been told by McCullum, that James Anderson is a revelation when it comes to coaching and being around the fast bowling group. It is essential for him to be around. He's 12th man. That's his new job. He's not allowed to play, but he tells everybody, that keeps the bowling group, gives them ideas and all that, right? You know where he is? He's playing golf, right? His actual job that he gets paid money for is coaching England cricket bowlers during cricket matches, right? That's his job. He said, Brendan, you're a bit of a lad. I want to play in this golf tournament. And Brendan said, yeah, you probably won't make the cut anyway. Join us when you feel like it. He then makes the cut in this, what is it, a pro-am or a charity tournament or whatever, and he's not here, right? As England are getting battered into the dust by an okay batting lineup from Pakistan, and there were shorn of ideas, no hint of reverse swing, throwing the ball to Bashir, who is not up to it in Test match cricket in these conditions. He can't get in his own team and all that. It's not his fault he's playing, but Chris Woakes trundling down 73 miles an hour nonsense. Absolute crap, England. And James Anderson should be there helping them a bit, but instead he's playing golf. And the guy, I saw, I don't know if you saw Athers asking him questions on Sky, basically, where's James Anderson? And he said, he's playing golf. When's he coming? He said, well, he'll be here on day 2 or something. He didn't even know when he's going to get there. And he went, but it doesn't really matter. If it doesn't matter, why has he got the job? Why are you paying him money why is the ECB paying him money to help the bowlers? You said 5 minutes ago it was the best thing since sliced bread when it came to coaching fast bowlers. And now you're saying it doesn't matter if he's not here when our fast bowlers are doing crap. Somebody explain. Don't understand. They've become a parody of themselves.
It's certainly and I get your general point there as well, because like they keep saying nothing matters. And at a certain point, well, if nothing matters, then all the other stuff you've told us also doesn't matter, right? The vibes don't matter. But it's just like they've built like this illusion of competency, whereas actually it's just lads on tour, right? Like I think we're all aware at this point, it's very lads on tour. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's they went with Leach. I thought they might not even play Leach, if we're being honest. Did you not think that was a possibility?
Well, I thought with Stokes not playing Test 1, I mean, Stokes is the biggest, as we said before the show, Stokes is the biggest Leach fan because he batted with him for half an hour while he was, being extremely lucky in a Test match innings that will define him. So Leach is kind of Stokes' mate, so he's going to play a lot. But to be fair, the cupboard is so bare that they're picking people on fumes and hunches that Leach... I wouldn't pick Leach, but I wouldn't have picked Leach in the first place. A very fair question there is, who would you pick then? And you think, well, I know Leach isn't the answer, so I would have tried somebody else. And they did have a go with Rehan Ahmed, and they probably have a go with his brother before very long. And there's other guys who will get a go that 20 years ago wouldn't even been considered. Now, it's not only England's problem, the lack of spinners.
I don't know about 20 years ago. I think 20 years ago was Richard Dawson.
Okay, 15 years ago. England had a bit of time where they had a great spin cupboard with Monty and Swan, both at the same time, both of which England would be utterly desperate.
And Adil Rashid, who they didn't want to pick.
Imagine if they'd have had him in Test as long as they had him in white ball stuff. They tried to knacker him. Swan tried to knacker himself. Monty is one of life's great, riddles wrapped in bloody Monty. Fine, we don't have any of that. Pakistan's cupboard isn't as full as it used to be. I mean, for many years they went, we've got Ajmal, so good luck, and then they went, we've got Yasir Shah in Test matches, so good luck. They don't have much anymore.
Just on England, so Simple Maths has said, funny thing about England is they prepare for Ashes in Australia, and the last 3 series have been 5-0, 4-0, 4-0, and it's kind of pointless. But someone else also said here, England's bowling attack is still better than Pakistan, and I am not insane. The interesting thing about this is the first time we've actually seen Pakistan's bowling attack assembled, isn't it? Because this is the first time they've had Shaheen, Naseem, and Abrar Ahmed, if I'm not mistaken, at the one time. And look, Pakistan's bowling has been absolutely dreary. I think I said it was as erotic as uncooked broccoli, right? Like, it's been really pointless, their bowling, and especially at home. And you know what I liked? I think it was their seamers. You're like this. Their seamers were averaging 47 at home, right? And you're like, wow, flat pitches. The opposition seamers were averaging like 31, right? And the spinners, you talked about the spinners before. Abrar Ahmed basically took a bunch of wickets on his own, and no one else has taken any wickets from the spinners either. Like, it's been really, really bad. So it's not like we're suddenly... And the first wicket the Pakistan have got, of course, was from... I mean, it was fine. It was back of a length ball, but it was whacked off the middle of the bat. It just happened to be a hanger was taken at short mid wicket. But it's not that we're sitting here saying that Pakistan is suddenly a good team. It was second ball. You're right, but we're not suddenly saying that Pakistan is a good team, and they've got a lot more to go. To put some pressure on and everything else. But we did just watch England bowl, right? We did see them bowl, and we did think to ourselves, is Shoaib Bashir bowling down the leg side their funkiest tactic? Like, is that where they've come? Is that all they've got left? And some of this has got to be that Ben Stokes is not on the field, because I think he, at least tactically, is a little bit more with it.
Yes,
but my
is.
God, I didn't feel at any stage like I was watching anything special there.
No, you weren't. Stokes, the captain, is really, really good. Like, I can talk about Stokes and his other stuff, but Stokes, the captain, I'm such an enormous fan of, because when England are under it, he does think, and he has got a really good cricket brain, and he does manufacture stuff, and it's like, right, well, let's try this for a bit, let's try that for a bit. Pope isn't that guy, he may be, he's had 50 test matches though. He's not a child, Ollie Pope. Like, he could have watched what was happening in those 50 test matches and come with some ideas.
Has he played 50 test matches, or has he played the same match 50 times?
Yeah,
because he's a bit, he does feel like that kind of a player sometimes, right?
Yeah, it's like he's been around forever, but he's also really young. He's conflicts my brain. I don't.
I believe you're talking about the Ian Bell syndrome.
Well, Ian Bell did the same thing every time. But what a cover drive, and I think that's fair. Like, why he played in 05. I mean, how easily England would have won if Thorpe was playing instead of Bell in 05. That's a mystery. Yeah, England it's so infuriating because, like, honestly, look back 2 years. That was about as exciting as England could be. Is going away in Pakistan and scoring 575 overs and going, this is us. And then they've got 3 bowlers going at 2 and over on the roadiest roads ever, and manufacturing results. Fantastic. Fast forward 2 years, and it's the old clown car with no wheels and pratfalling everywhere and utter nonsense. I do want to talk about Pope's dismissal, because that is completely accepted now because it was a great catch, right? Pope got caught at mid-wicket by a diving one-hander, and that was, you don't hear me say this very often, that was a very good catch, right? Very, you wouldn't have expected it to
I need a honker. Right? I need one about honkers.
Yeah. We must get though. What on earth are we doing?
Bum, bum.
Yeah, they're probably in storage at Brooks' house.
Yeah, why the hell am I being sent expensive lights when I could be being sent things that go meh, meh? But anyway, it was his second ball, and they're 550 behind. The Wilds, smash in the air.
He should have reversed
in years
it.
gone by, that doesn't happen.
That's good.
He should have reversed it down to fine leg, and everything would have been fine. It's a crazy team. It's on these decks, you're never a million miles away from 180 partnership off 250 balls if England want to do that. But if this England team, as with every England team I've ever watched, is never far away from the funny collapse. So I would be surprised if England get out of this. They're not going to play for a draw, are they? I'd be surprised if England get out of this. But it's must be a really funny team to watch from the outside. It's funny from being English and maddening and everything else. But one thing England have been consistently, which you must give them credit for, is funny.
Oh, I think so. I can't remember when I put this up, but it was like 2017, maybe 2018. I said England was the most interesting team in cricket, and like I thought it was. I was like, there was plenty of research in what I was saying. I was like, look at what they're doing in one-day cricket at the moment. Look at how funny they are as a test nation. Look at them trying database stuff when not all the data is lined up, and all the different things that they were doing, and people were just not ready for England to be interesting. Like, there's a colonial hangover there. There was also, to be fair, 30 years where they weren't interesting, right? Like, let's not, even when they were good, even in 2010-11 when they were good, they were still not actually all that interesting as a team. Like, I got it, but people just weren't ready for that. And it's like, Vish on Twitter is always putting up that, are they going to choose to be good or to choose to be funny? And they always choose to be funny. And they've been doing that for an awful long time now, right? Like, and like I was watching that last wicket today when Ben Duckett is like attacking the slips catch and looks like he's got a broken rib trying to take a slips catch. And I was like, it looked like he swore at the ball. Like, there's a lot of weird dudes in that environment at the moment. It could have been worse. He could have poured a beer over the ball.
Well, that's the throwback. But did you see the Wokes drop or uncatch on the fence?
Yeah.
a couple of hours ago. Again, he chose funny and really flair over just catching him, because take 2 steps back, catch it on your chest, or, and this is definitely Stokes' fault, or run in 10 yards, then run back 10 yards and try and do loads of funny stuff on the boundary and catch it. And yeah, he nearly did it, but the result was 6 instead of a wicket. And it's really weird to talk about test matches as 6 instead of a wicket, but that's where we are now. England are doing ludicrous stuff. We haven't even said Cars. Like, why is Cars playing in a test match in Asia now? Like, he did okay in really swingy conditions for 1.5 spells of the white ball summer. That's it. He's bowling it in Asia. If you were doing this properly, you'd have loads of spinners, but England don't have any of them.
He did get a wicket with a bouncer that didn't bounce, which I'm always like. If you could do that, I'm a big fan of that. What do you think of Shan Masood? I thought it was quite interesting. So Shan Masood said a while back that he was inspired by Bazball, which is hilarious for those of us who were at the start of Shan Masood's career, because he was inspired by I don't know, Charles Bannerman. No, who's Trevor Franklin? Who's the most defensive player you grew up watching?
Oh
Athers?
God. Athers didn't play many shots, did he?
Yeah.
Collingwood was like the one that everybody called Brigadier Block, but Collingwood had game when he wanted to. Athers would be the one that sort of springs to mind, because you always think of the Alan Donald not playing a shot for ages.
Yeah.
Or nicking off and not being able to, umpires not knowing what a catch means.
And then, you know, watching Shan Masood sort of like just block and play and miss. To have him come to the level that now is like such a big change, right? And watching him whack the ball and completely go for it. I mean, come on, Rob. There was a lot of fun there.
Yeah, Shah Masood is one of those guys. Like, I've watched him a lot in T20s as well, where he doesn't quite know what he wants to do. Like, so he's naturally, I think, a very defensive player, but he's also got some really good shots. And some of his T20 innings of, like, he's got 38 off 28 with 15 dots and a load of nice falls. I can't quite work him out, but he's clearly a really talented guy. I think in good batting conditions, which he got yesterday, he's going to be the guy that gets 150 when he puts his mind to it. He's a very, very good cricketer. Again, captaincy-wise, what a poison chalice that is if you're captain of Pakistan, when all your bosses are changing every week and the mentors are changing, and this is what we're going to do. I mean, you know, that England being amazing 2 years ago, it was a Pakistan attack that I think had 3 guys playing in their first test match. Like, Harris Ralph was in it. Leaky Ralph was
about 12 overs, didn't he?
Yeah, getting spanked all around the park, and they went, okay, we can't do this anymore. How do you be captain of Pakistan is a question for 12-hour podcast mega series or whatever. That's a tough gig, but for him to come out, and let's not forget that the one constant in Pakistan cricket now isn't constant, was Babar scoring runs all the time. So that doesn't happen anymore. So that turns the captaincy in for something where you can fall back on everything being okay because Babar's going to bat particularly when it's easy. You know, 3 years ago, Babar's getting 100, no question. On
a wicket like this,
attack. Yeah. And was it Wokes at LBW? You know, come on now.
Do you know what, that was actually quite interesting? I don't know if anyone, I think someone in the comments might have asked a question about that early on, but it's quite interesting if you go back and you have a look at the balls. And the kind of the setup there. So, you know, I did the big video on him and his toes and where he's going. The ball before he gets beaten outside off stump. And up until that point, he was sort of keeping himself middle and leg with his left foot around leg stump, right? But then the ball before that, Wokes beats him outside off stump, and he automatically tries to cover the court behind again. And he goes right across his stumps. And you have a look at where his pad is. It goes literally on the line of off stump, which is not really where you want your front pad to be in a DRS era. And that ball nipped a little bit, but it wasn't an unplayable ball. Like, most international players get that. And if his front pad's not in the way, he probably just knocks that to mid. And does an issue there as well. So look, I thought that was quite interesting. And I mean, Pakistan, at the very least, they look like they had some life. And let's be honest, it's been 10 test matches since we've seen them have any life at home. So even if they manage to bring this back and lose from here, I felt like there was a pulse, Rob Barron, and we hadn't seen a pulse in a long time.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was actually it's a good deck and this attack's terrible. Like I'm trying to think of a test match team that wouldn't have got more than 400 against that attack, and none are jumping into my head. Like I think Ireland probably would have got 400 against that attack yesterday.
I don't know. I've seen South Africa bat a lot.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
Bettingham's going to have to make 170, isn't he?
It's been a bit harsh on Tony DeZorzi. Okay. Pakistan have shown some life. Let's see what they do now. It's hard for Pakistan because like numbers don't mean anything. They don't make any sense when Pakistan play. What you see with your eyes doesn't make any sense when Pakistan play. So I'll never be able to judge them. I've spent a lot of my own money misjudging Pakistan when it comes to betting down the years. I can assure you of that. They're just a team where you have to suspend what you think you know and go, okay, are they doing this? Are they doing a good one here? Is Shaheen and Naseem actually awesome like I thought they were going to be, and then they weren't, and now they are again? Like, who knows? Like, who knows when they're going to be great? They've got some players that could be, but I do still think the big question that Pakistan have got is no spinner. I know Babar's in really bad form, despite churning out runs in the list A. I don't know how good the standard is of Stallions when they're playing against the other teams, but he seemed to get 50 easy every time. But his international form is rubbish, Babar, and it's sustained rubbish for, 18 months nearly? All formats?
It's a while now, isn't it? Yeah.
That's a big worry, but they don't have any spinners, Jarrod.
They don't have any spinners. I actually thought he looked okay batting in this innings. But as I said, he regresses to that problem across off stump. But I know he's trying to fix it, obviously. And he's been working on it for a little while now. But there is an issue there. They don't have any spinners. I think that's a fascinating one as well. Like how they've basically gone from having Yasir Shah and Syed Ajmal at the same time to hoping that Abrar Ahmed wasn't lucky in the first time he played against England, right? Like that's essentially where Pakistan have got to when it comes to spinners. So it's a huge change. We're going to take a quick break here, Rob.
Sure.
Baron, and we'll be back in a moment with more Cricket 8 podcast.
Remember to support us by subscribing and sharing, but also signing up at cricket8.com, where live scorecards cover 8,000 matches a year with advanced visual details that tell you who is actually in front in the game.
Welcome back. Jarrod and Rob are with you. We got a couple of comments I thought we could get through as well here. I think we've already put some of those up here. I've got one here for Arjun. Arjun's put this in about 5 times, and I just wanted to smash it in the face because it was a very, very silly comment. Arjun had said, BCCI shouldn't host Bangladesh for any more games. They're absolute rubbish team with no growth. Even Afghanistan are better in white ball cricket. What lack of growth do you need? Like, literally, they went to India, and they had India 6 on the first day of a test match with seam bowling. If I'd have told you that 15 years ago, you would have assumed that I was high at the time. We have seen much more consistent results from Bangladesh over a long period of time. They've actually finally got together a 5-person bowling attack that's quite nice. They're about to lose that, of course, as Shakib goes off into the sunset. They've got a very good middle order, of which they've really flirted with at times before. But certainly in fast bowling alone, they've done it. And if you look at their results, they are winning far more at home and away than they ever have before. They're playing the best team in the world away. They're supposed to get smashed, right? This is what Australian fans always used to do. Australian fans would see a team come over, pay no attention to anything else they've done, right? See a team come over and just be like, look, they're crap. Australia beat them. They can't handle Warne and McGrath. They must not be a good team. So, yeah, that's how it's supposed to be, Muppet.
Yeah, I think you put them away well enough there. But didn't Bangladesh like the team that just beat Pakistan 2-0 away like 5 minutes ago?
Yep.
Okay.
The second whitewash that Pakistan had ever have, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, so Bangladesh are actually pulling up trees. So yeah, if that comment was from 9 years ago, I allow it, but it must be batted back over the bowler's head. That sort of nonsense. Come on now, you're better than that, Argent.
Yep. Crunk said, Mike Gadag literally looks like the most talented bowler I've ever seen. He's never seen Rob Barron.
I like the comment. Bloody hell, yeah. What
do you bowl? Just straight breaks?
No, I moon balls. a Dusra that is it's sort of 14 physio sessions per ball bowled, the Dusra.
Yep.
So moon balls are very, very obvious whole body. I nearly pulled my shoulder out doing that. Whole body Dusra that doesn't really do anything. Absolutely horrendous. Never really played cricket in my life, but when I do, I'm terrible. Good at captaining, good at catching, but not very good at cricket. A bit like Ben Stokes. Boom, boom. Sorry, what was that last one? Mayank Yadav, right? When I first saw that guy, most talented ever, don't know. Most exciting, like box office, I'm on the edge of my seat here. You know when he blew into the IPL and got 2 man of the matches in his first 2 games, and then in the other 2 games he played, he couldn't even finish his spell because he was too injured. Like, there's so much about him. Impossible man from a betting point of view. You just have to hope he survives. But when he's actually bowling, because he's not Shamar Joseph, who is like, he's box office because anything could happen. You remember his first over in the IPL, which was like 28
19 balls. Okay. Somewhere between
like,
one of us is right.
It was like wides and buys and leg buys and massive wides and no balls, and then the best ball I've ever seen. And like one of them. He's not him. He's somebody who is extremely imagine a fit Mayank Yadav in the India team all the time with Bumrah at the other end. Like, you're never going to lose a game. Like, they're that good, but he's not fit. And he's like, we haven't even seen him be fit 2 games in a row yet in his career at the top level. I mean, he hasn't managed to do 2 IPL games where he's bowled 4 overs in a row yet. So yes, he has it, but how many times have you seen somebody as a bowler? It normally works with spinners, but it does work to a similar extent with pace, is where somebody blows onto the scene who bowls differently from other people. It might be that it's extreme pace, might be that it comes from a different release point or whatever. And then teams eventually work them out. So we don't know whether that will happen because he hasn't played anything yet. But I do have to agree a bit with Crunk in that when I saw him for the first time, I was like, wow, I am genuinely excited to watch this guy, whereas I don't get that very often from paces. No, I didn't feel like that about Josh Hull when I saw him play, who's playing Test matches.
Yadav, the Josh Hull of England, of India. Sorry.
But if he is fit, kind like India are a bit of a cheat code because that's not fair, that attack, because they actually have spinners. They've already got the head and shoulders best bowler in the world. And if you add in a fit Mayank Yadav, who is as good as that guy that turned up and played a couple of times in the IPL, they don't lose. They can't lose to anyone with that attack.
Yeah, I think he's a really, really fascinating player. I mean, when you say he's the most talented bowler he's seen, like, there's not that much difference between him and Pat Cummins when Pat Cummins came on the scene. Pat Cummins was bowling, 150, 155 outswing and is taller than Mayank Yadav and probably has a higher release. So the Pat Cummins we see now is, dare I say it, kind of boring, right? Like, consistent and accurate and doesn't swing it and, isn't that kind of player. But if you think back to what Pat Cummins was in that first Test match in South Africa, you were seeing literally very similar to Mayank Yadav. And of course, we then didn't see Pat Cummins for 6 years. The next time I saw Pat Cummins, I interviewed him at the SCG, and he'd just come off a machine, Rob, that allows you to run without putting any weight on your body. It's like, I don't know, some sort of moon-like machine. So you do the cardio, but you don't actually put any impact on. And I was like,
it's called a swimming pool.
No, that's what they do to horses. But yeah, it's a bit like that. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, we're never going to see this dude again. Like, if he's 22 years old and the only way for him to do cardio is with a machine that Cricket New South Wales or Cricket Australia had to like ship in from overseas, it's not likely. And to be honest, I think he missed 6 years of international cricket, and Australia had 4 prime ministers. So it was a big stint out of the game at that point. And when he came back, he wasn't that kind of bowler anymore. Right, like he had changed, and then obviously the wobble ball played a big part and everything else. So you can, Crunk, get very excited about a young bowler, and then a couple of years in, that bowler is very different. I mean, it's not just bowlers, of course. Remember, David Warner, when we first saw him, was flat batting Dale Steyn back over his head.
Yeah, good.
And when was the last time that David Warner could play a shot? Like David Warner, if you watched a video of that, would get a pain in his shoulder now, right? Like, age wearies you and everything else. The thing with Mayank Yadav that I really like, and the injuries, we're just going to have to see how that goes. But the thing I really like is it's not one dimension.
He's not Imran Malik, is he?
Yeah, well, Umar Malik or Mark Wood, right? Those are two one-dimensional players. If they are not bowling at 90 miles an hour, like what is the point in them ever being in a cricket team? Because I look at Mayank Yadav and I'm like, do you know what? He's accurate, especially for someone of his pace, and he can move the ball. There's a couple of different parts to him, right? So if something falls off, and hopefully not literally, because that would be leprosy or something, or he's been or he's been dismembered. I don't understand how I got into this analogy, but
Please
if something falls, if something falls off from him as a bowler, I think he has other things to build on. Whereas if you look at that with some of those other, Umar Malik, as you just said, is a perfect example of, well, he's not accurate. He doesn't really move the ball sideways, and he doesn't seem to understand what he's doing. The little bit that we're seeing in Mayank Yadav at the moment, he does understand all those things.
Because what happens, and TV is mainly the biggest guilty party in this, is when somebody comes along who is fast, everybody gets very excited and they look at speed guns and they don't look at anything else. And speed guns are obviously extremely doctored anyway. But when Umran Malik came along, you're like, bloody hell, that is genuinely really, really fast. And then fast forward 4 games, you're like, yeah, but it's really, really fast in the slot every single time. And it's like his power play numbers are abominable, Umran Malik. Like he turns up and he goes at 12 and over in the power play consistently. And whenever he gets an over in the power play, it's just scrambling as hard as you can to get on overs and back boundary every single ball, because it's it's really, really fast. But how good are good players at really, really fast balls in the slot? The ones that are going to hit them directly between the eyes or in the neck, they're the ones they don't like. And Malik didn't work it out. Whereas Mayank is a totally different guy. Like he's a completely different cricketer. So you have Shamar Joseph, who put it together in a test match against Australia and won a test match nearly by himself when he had a bad foot or whatever, and you're like, that is incredible and it's exciting, and how good is he? He goes to T20 with no experience of bowling with a white ball, and has to suddenly go, right, here's the IPL, let's see how you get on. It's a totally different ball game, like literally, and he got found out in about 5 minutes, but they didn't persevere with him. KKR, wasn't it? Didn't persevere with him, just like immediately see you later, like this is the IPL, you can't bowl like that. But 3 very different, yet all very interesting cases there. Mayank Yadav is the one that you think, blimey, he could be anything, but it doesn't look good for his long-term prospects, and he might have to come back. I mean, but it's not like he had his action knackered like England tried to do with Jimmy Anderson, for example, where he had to have a load of time out of the game because his team tried to break him in half. We've not had that. I think it just looks like he's unlucky, but he's only 22, Mayank Yadav. They do have time to, do what they need to do with him. But what may happen, and Pakistan do this with their guys, is they go, well, we've got this great commodity, let's bowl him all the time, and then he breaks and we never see him again. And we don't want that to happen. So don't do that, please.
No. Kronk said, Cummins was not as fast as Mayank. I've seen the clips. He was more 145-ish, not 155. He was 155 when he was 18, 19. He was absolutely lightning. When the first time I saw him, I think might have even been live. I was just like, I cannot believe this guy is bowling the way that Pat Cummins does. He bowls 145 now, Kronk, and I promise you, if you talk to Pat Cummins, he'd say he's nowhere near the pace that he used to be. He bowled 145 in the last IPL. So way quicker when he was young.
Cummins is a guy that is top 3 test bowlers in the world right now, I would say, Cummins. Yeah. But until very recently, where he's worked out that he's a very limited white ball bowler, particularly T20 bowler, I think that is because he bowls like he was the guy that had the massive pace in his locker, the 155. And he actually bowls it near a 140, and he gets carted all the time. So he is somebody that... He was like, well, I'm going to be really good as a power play bowler. And again, KKR spent all the money. And then SRH, I'm going to be really, really good as a power play bowler. And he wasn't. And he was like, well, maybe I'm the guy. And he's kind of worked it out now. But the amount of cash that he got for being the guy that could bowl 155 when he bowled in 140 is very different. Pretty rubbish.
I don't think he bowled... He hadn't bowled 155. I think when he first came back, so what would he have been, 24, 25, he could still get up to that speed if he needed to very occasionally. And I saw some very fast spells. But he hasn't bowled anywhere near 155 certainly in the last, 6, 7, 8 years. And I think you're right. It's quite interesting when you think about him. He's basically developed into a very, very accurate 88 mile an hour seamer, right? Who can occasionally ramp up slightly. And that was in red ball cricket. And in white ball cricket, he never developed any extra skills for a long period of time, partially because he didn't have to. But the point is that Crunk, people were as excited about Pat Cummins, and now we see Pat Cummins as almost a very good stock bowler. But like, if you had a choice of watching, I mean, you named it before. If you had a choice of watching Rabada or Bumrah or Cummins, like you're from an entertainment point of view, you're always going to pick the other two over Cummins. Now, that was not the case back in what?
No, it wasn't. I remember
2012
watching,
or whenever it was when he started.
I remember watching Bumrah's first couple of games in the IPL, and it wasn't like that. His name was the funny thing for me, because in Thundercats they had Mumra, and so I was just shouting Bumrah all the time, and that's what I remember about him starting. It wasn't that and yes, his action is very interesting, Bumrah, but it wasn't like, oh my god, this is the guy. And it was for Cummins. To be fair, Rabada in Test, when I first saw him in Test matches, that was very exciting. You're like, bloody hell, they found somebody here, because he was awesome. He was instantly really, really good. But so was Cummins. It took Bumrah some time, didn't it, to get good? But Cummins was like, and also Cummins can bat, and was clearly like very switched on with. He was almost like a complete cricketer straight away. I
was going to say, because I can't remember. Did he help Australia win a Test 8 wickets down in one of the first, or maybe draw a Test? I can't remember now. It was like 12 years ago.
They used to draw.
You're right.
Back then, you know.
Yeah, I actually remember I talked to Ed Cowan about them, because Josh Hazlewood was obviously coming through, and Mitchell Starc was a little bit ahead of them, and he said that Cummins was the one that had the highest ceiling as a bowler. But he was really high up on Hazlewood, and no one really thought about Hazlewood that much. These days, there's not that much between Hazlewood and Cummins. They just bowl in a slightly different way. One sort of skids it into your stumps a little bit more, and the other one's trying to get you to nick off to slip, right? They're slightly different bowlers. Whereas if you remember them when they were young, Hazlewood was thought to be the next Glenn McGrath, and Cummins was the absolute tearaway. Parth has sent a message. It's a super chat, in fact. So thank you, Parth. Jarrod used a weird supposed Jewish word called, what's he said, shibluff, in a pod here, to explain how a Chinese could get good at cricket in 5 years by using tacit knowledge. Can he spell it out, or did he make it up? I didn't make it up. Do you know the word I'm talking about?
Right, hang on. You're not supposed to have that, but right, like we quite often get some questions from left field, but Path right winger, I get it now. Okay. You're going to have to answer that one, mate. I've not heard of Shy Bluff.
Shia LaBeouf, I think, is an actor in Hollywood, isn't he? So the word is shibboleth. I can spell it. It's Sierra Hotel India Bravo Bravo Oscar Lima Echo Tango Hotel. It's basically a word that is used to explain that how when Jewish people met when they were from far off lands, that they knew that the other person was Jewish through traditions or the way that they moved or spoke, rather than them saying, I am Jewish, or I am wearing a yarmulke, or whatever. And so shibboleth is, I don't know if it's a Yiddish word or what the actual origin of the word is, but it's used now as a really cut, right? Because if you think about it, it explains a lot. So when me and Rob Barron met each other, right? I didn't need to spend ages with Rob Barron to understand that Rob Barron was the sort of person that I could have really, really boring conversations with for hours on end about topics that only me and Rob Barron could do, because it's quite obvious in the sorts of things that he was talking about that he was looking at the game in a very similar way to me. And so if there's anyone here who's a fan of the show West Wing, there's a really interesting one in West Wing where I think there's a new character coming in, and one of the other characters just sends a letter going, he's one of us. Right. And you would have this in your friendship group and everything else. Sometimes you could just tell when someone belongs to be in your group. And the shibboleth is the sort of the formal version of that. And by a shibboleth, what I mean is, so I talk to a lot of analysts, right? And one of the things I quite often will start with an analyst is I will say, oh, did he bowl a cutter there? Did he run his fingers along the side of the ball? Right. And I can tell the difference between an analyst who has my kind of knowledge and an analyst who could just read a spreadsheet. Because if they look at me with a blank face, So you talking about cutters with analysts is quite often a shibboleth for me to understand where they are. That's not saying that the person who doesn't understand what a cutter is or couldn't come in and bowl one in the nets if they had to is a bad person or can't even be a great analyst, because a lot of them can. But there's a big difference between that person and where I'm at, and so I understand it. And I do. We all have these shibboleths that we use in our work, and if you become like me and Rob, and you become middle management type people, and you end up having to do this sometimes for job interviews and stuff like that, it's really handy to be able to tell where someone is by sort of poking them a little bit and testing them. I remember years ago, I got asked to do a job interview, and the person was like, "So, who would you say is the best left arm finger spinner in the world at the moment for T20 cricket?" And they didn't want the answer. Right? What they wanted was me to go through, well, you would say Jadeja, but Jadeja, blah, blah, blah. And Krunal Pandya, I really like, but he's not making any runs anymore, or whatever that may be. I really like Akshar Patel, but I'm probably out on a limb here. And there probably isn't that many great left arm finger spinners out from outside of India if you have a look at it at the moment. But Imad Wasim is a really good player. They didn't want the answer. They didn't give a shit who I chose, but they wanted to know that I could build that case.
Right.
That's what they were looking for.
That's what interviews are. Regrettably, I have to do a lot of interviews these days, and yeah, the questions you're asking, and I try and say this, so it's like the question here is not so that I stress you out. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, and I don't really care about the answer, but I just want to see how your brain works. I just want to see how you get to your answer, and that's fine. The funny thing about that is that traditionally when this is pre-interview, so you send your CV in, and they'd ask a couple of questions over email. And the standard one used to be, I remember when I had in my first interview for a cricket trading job in 2002, I had to, 2005 maybe, where I became a full-time cricket trader, I had to name my World 11 for 2 different formats because T20 wasn't really a thing then. Like, give us your World 11 for test matches. And I had Sarwan in mind, and they were like, you can't have Sarwan. You're not allowed. He got the most runs in Test match cricket that year, and I quickly surpassed the 2 idiots that gave me the job. Anyway, now we had to say, what is your World T20 11, right, is a standard question. We can't ask it anymore because we got out of, I think, 15 applied in like the first day or whatever for some trading job, and 13 of them had exactly the same 11 with the same rationale because of Chat GP or whatever it's called. And it was like I would pick Rohit Sharma. This is a year ago as well. You're like wrong. He's scoring 115 strike rate, and then it just literally for the same. He is a dynamic batsman who is very good on against the football.
But again, that is kind of what you are looking for, right? Because if you can instantly see that ChatGPT is being used, that's not the person that you want. Right. Yeah. Like if they can't come up with their own side. So again, it works in the same kind of way. And I quite often, I would say to a writer, what are your 3 best pieces? Right. You want to do some writing for me? What are your 3 best pieces? And I can tell instantly by the pieces that they give me. And they'll often say, this is the one that did really well. And I'm like, that
doesn't matter. Yeah.
My best pieces never really did all that well. Or they will say, and it will always be a piece about, if it's India, it's Virat Kohli, and if it's Pakistan, it's Babar Azam, right? And I was like, I don't think your best pieces are about Virat Kohli and Babar Azam. So I instantly don't think that you understand what your best pieces are. So as an editor or as a co-writer,
Evan Galbis, isn't it?
If all the pieces aren't about Evan Galbis, I don't understand what the point would be. Just a final one on Crunk. He says, you look back at the highlights of South African series. What are you talking about? Crunk, he bowled 65 overs in a Sheffield Shield game. He was already crooked by the time he got to South Africa. Some things, believe it or not, Crunk, I've probably seen more cricket than you. I saw I don't know how many it was. I think he bowled 65 overs. It might have been 68 overs in that Sheffield Shield final. It was an incredible spell of bowling that basically ruined Pat Cummins for 6 years. And I remember bringing that spell of bowling up with Bumble one day when he was upset about the way that Jofra was treated in New Zealand. And we're still seeing the impacts of a spell of fast bowling like that on a very fast bowler. Generally, we see this a lot and they don't come back. There's also, you lose some of your elasticity in fast bowling. So Jeff Thompson, after he did his shoulder, was still fast. No one's saying Jeff Thompson wasn't fast when they were facing him in the 80s. There's a story of Ian Healy facing him. I think he had flip-flops on and came into the nets and scared the hell out of Ian Healy. But everyone knows that Jeff Thompson was not the same level of bowler. And if you look through the history of cricket, Mark Wood, I would say, is a peculiarity in someone who's been able to maintain his maximum speed. We're already seeing Unwritten Nokia looking slower than he has over the last couple of years. So we might have only seen 2 or 3 years of Unwritten Nokia. And most fast bowlers, Crunk, by the time they get to international level, have already slowed down. Sean Tate was far quicker before he played for Australia than when he played for Australia.
Right.
And that is just a fact of how these things go. And one day, Rob, we might be able to change that.
Well, at least the Pat Cummins spell, you can remember it, and it was worthwhile, and it helped his team in the Sheffield Shield. The Jofra Archer in New Zealand.
I think they still lost.
Oh, did they? Right. Okay, maybe not then. But the Jofra Archer one was just making him bowl 40 overs in an innings that was destined to be drawn anyway. And they've ruined the best thing that English cricket could have had for the last 30 years. If they had Jofra Archer, that guy that turned up in 2018. The Hobart Hurricanes.
It's really
weird
when you look at baseball pitches, isn't it? Because baseball pitches these days specifically are so well treated, because it's like, what we want to be able to do is keep you at maximum. And it's not just maximum velocity, because you could argue that Pat Cummins is a better bowler now than when he was 18 or 19. Yeah. And I would certainly argue that. But it's about also the ability to be able to move the ball sideways in a maximum capacity as well. And, that's what baseball pitchers are trying to do. They're trying to keep as quickly as possible. And also make sure that they're getting as much sideways dip or dip or whatever kind of action they're trying to put on the ball.
But we're not doing that in cricket, right? It's because cricketers are much more precious than this. And so you've told me in the past that I shout at you, why on earth have Australia got this batting order? And you say, well, Steve Smith won't bat anywhere else, so that's the end of that. And I say, well, it's not the right thing for the team, so you must do it. But in baseball, they literally have guys whose full-time job is to look, and they might have machines that help them look, but biomechanically they look at the pitcher's arm and they say, right, it's dropped 2 degrees, you're done, finished. And they go, you've bowled or you've thrown this many pitches, you've thrown 38, and I'm sorry, but your speed's dropped. And the pitcher doesn't have a hissy fit and say he's never going to play for the club again. He just walks off and says, right, I've earned my 200 grand for that game. All the best to the guy in the bullpen who's been warming up for the last 15 minutes and he's throwing rockets, right? He's got a cannon for an arm just like me, but my cannon's tired now and I've got to play again tomorrow. So cheers, lads, all the best. Over to you. And if he's crap in one pitch, if they're like, no, your arm, it's not coming out, mate, sorry, they just go, you're gone as well, bye. And he goes, sorry, yeah, clearly my arm's it's not coming out right. Cricket doesn't do that. I mean, I think they should do it with goalkeepers in football. When you can see somebody's having a shocker, get him out, get him off the field before you concede another one. But cricketers, they don't have a bullpen now. They will do one day, when they have like a net at the side, because the amount of times you see people come in, Usman Khawaja could have benefited if he'd have averaged 110 if he'd have had a net just outside. The ones that are crap at starting, but bowlers, that was a loosener. It's just an accepted thing in cricket. It's like he's bowled a shit ball because it's his first one. Like, why? Like, get ready. We kind of switched topics very quickly there, but baseball does absolutely loads of stuff, and particularly with keeping stats like fielding errors, which can win you championships. If you're not, what's the guy's name? Bill Beecham or whatever, the fella that dropped the ball for Boston that cost him a championship. What was his name? It was basically no one forgets that now. He can't walk down the street without being, moaned at by people from Boston.
I mean, you weren't even sure what his name was a second ago, but no one forgets it.
Bill somebody. No one's ever forgotten that guy's name. I can't remember. But basically, they keep all these. Cricket could learn a lot from baseball. I think it does a bit. I've seen a few things where guys have gone over or whatever. But they don't do that, do they? They don't say, oh, Jofra, if we make you bowl another 10 overs on the reel here, we might lose you for 5 years, or we might lose what we've got forever. There was no, there was just basically arbitrarily a captain goes, can you do another one? And he's like, yeah, sure, I'm 21, no problem. I'll just do another one.
And I think you go to baseball, it's built into baseball that the pitchers don't play every game, right? And it has been for a long, I mean, I'm not a baseball historian, but from what I understand, for a long period of time, baseballers have had days off, right? And we never built that into cricket. And then we got to that point around the sort of end of Glenn McGrath's career when John Buchanan is saying, maybe you should just rest. He's like, you could never rest me. What are you doing? Trying not to play me in this game. And the truth is that we know there is an element of that. Now, if you look at the Courtney Walsh days, Courtney Walsh is a fascinating example, right? Because Courtney Walsh's most of his career comes before there are speed guns, right? And after speed guns, it is very hard to do what Courtney Walsh did, which is essentially he probably bowled quite a lot of deliveries at about 120 and 125 kilometers an hour. And when the speed guns started to come in, we saw that in his career, right? But we also know that Courtney Walsh could get up to 135 at any stage, and he was tall as hell, and he was accurate, and he could seam the ball sideways, right? And so he played within himself in a way that Mayank Yadav is never going to be able to do. Do you remember that one spell that Jofra bowled at Headingley when the ball was nipping around and he bowled it at about 84 miles an hour and everyone went, is he tired? Is he injured? Is he dead?
No, he's just skillful.
You can't even slow down as a modern bowler now without everyone questioning you. And, Ollie Robertson is probably someone going, hallelujah. But the point being is that bowlers used to do that. So you can't compare Courtney Walsh or those older, Wasim Akram and those older bowlers, Glenn McGrath, to what we see today. Because in those days, they could keep pairing it back until, I don't know, Courtney Walsh playing for was it Northants he played for? Whoever he played for. He's probably bowling at about 115 kilometers an hour in some of those games because he's still 6'5". He's still deadly accurate and he's going to nip the ball around. But so now what we're doing is trying to get people to play as accurately. We're trying to get them to play near their peak almost all the time. And if you're trying to do that, you have to treat them like baseball pitchers, not like Fred Truman.
Yeah, it's unrealistic as well with the amount of planes that these people are now on. These bowlers are now going from game to game. It's much easier for the bats than it is. Planes are really bad for your back, and you there's no two ways about it. But baseball clearly treats their pitcher as the precious commodity that they are, whereas cricket is like, well, we want to get this guy on the park as much as we can. Interesting thing, possibly interesting, from betting on baseball, is when you listed a baseball team, you wouldn't say Arizona Diamondbacks are playing. You had to say that who the pitcher was. So it's Randy Johnson. Was he Arizona back then?
I think so.
It's like if Randy Johnson is playing, or Pettit that was the Yankees guy. It was on your betting slip. It was New York Yankees brackets Pettit because he made the price change so much. And if you didn't have the pitcher, if the pitcher that was on your betting slip didn't play or didn't start, then your bet was void. That's how important the pitcher is in that game.
I remember I went to my first. I've only been to one baseball game. I saw the A's play the Tigers, and I got my ticket. And I was really excited. It was a playoff game, and I got the ticket, and I read everything on ESPN about the game before I went. ESPN's like, this isn't going to be a game because the Tigers. I think they had an Australian pitcher at that stage. I think he was Australian or from New Zealand, something like that. And they were like, this is over because they're not going to score off this guy. And I was like, oh well, that's shit. So I'm going to my first ever Major League Baseball game. I'm in the Coliseum that's about to crumble around me, literally a Coliseum. And like this game is pointless. And I went to the game and the A's couldn't get a hit, right? Like it was exactly accurate. And that's how you and I feel on a certain wicket when, Narayan and Chakravarti are bowling together for KKR. It's like, well, this game's over because they've got this and it's going to go in that way. And so, I think it's a very different way of thinking about it than we do traditionally at cricket. And Krishna's just put a message in here as well. It says, people were criticizing Siraj for bowling 130 to 133 in the Bangladesh test. But I went back and saw his Border Gavaskar trophy and he mostly bowled the same there. Only a few more were 140. And this is my point. Is we've become, and I've stolen this from Alex Tudor, it's his point massively, but we have become such a slave to the bowling speed, right? Which we both know is not always entirely accurate. So when we were talking about Cummins versus Mayank Yadav before, we know that quite often the bowling speeds can still favor shorter bowlers, right? And there's a big part of that when you talk to players, they'll be like, don't tell me, Curtly Ambrose wasn't at this speed because I tell you what, it felt like he was way quicker than Ian Harvey, and the speed gun says they're the same speed. But Ian Harvey's 5'10" and Curtly Ambrose 6'8". There's always been an element of that, and we also know that there are certain broadcasts who amp up speeds, right? The old sky bump. And so you get these sorts of things. And we have to get away from that because the greatest bowlers in history, I think, are the ones who have the ability to ramp their speed up or ramp their speed down, right? And we if you go back and you read about those old bowlers, that's what they will say. Oh, I bowled at this pace when I was at my top pace. But when I needed to, I went to the other gear. And if you listen to the old fast bowlers, that's what they would say. Sometimes they would be like, the captain would just come up and go, this is the one you have to bend your back on because we really, really need, this guy won't like it. And this is when we need a wicket. Whereas maybe the third spell when you came back, they were just like, just stock bowling. We just don't want you to go for any runs.
Absolutely. What next?
Is that it? Are we done? Have I actually talked? I've talked Rob Barron out of a conversation.
No, you haven't. Let's start. I don't want to talk about Siraj because he makes me angry. Just somebody else.
We're done. We're done, Rob.
Fine.
Rob. We're done. We'll be back again next week where you get more Rob Barron. Do you have a lock of the week? England are 9-1 at the moment, aren't they?
Now 6-1.
No, they're 7s.
Because Abra is 4 overs, no maidens, none for 31. So now what for Pakistan is basically it. Crawley is runner balling, absolutely no problem. Do I have a lock of the week? I'm not good enough at betting on women's cricket. I am learning. I am sort of feeling my way.
You're learning very quickly. It's fun watching you learn it.
I'm already an absolute judge on dismissal methods. Just back, not caught every time in women's.
I think
I tell you what,
you talked about that the other day. Yeah,
you did a bit about Eccleston being somebody who aims at the stumps, didn't you? I watched that, and it's like she's just obviously her type of bowling lends itself to aiming at the stumps and getting a load of bowls. But watching that game yesterday and watching the bookies as I was, you're just like, what price can I get on bowled here? There are some times you watch the game and you're like, as somebody who I am not an expert on women's cricket and I would not profess to be, and from betting point of view, I shouldn't be getting involved on many things. But when a dismissal method looks incredibly likely, if you watch loads of cricket, the price that you can get from the bookies is probably too big. Like, because they're so used to going, I think bowled is 1 in 5, and they put 5 up, and then they go, it looks like bowled is a bit more likely, and they go 4.5. And you're like, well, no, like it's way more likely than that. And then you go, well, is 4? Well, 4 must be short enough. Well, it isn't. Like watch how they're playing here, and when they're 4 down, and 3 of the 4 were bowled, and it's 15 overs gone, and Eccleston's back into the attack. Was it Dean is the other one at the other end? And it's like every ball is pitching in line, aiming at the stumps, and the legs aren't anywhere near it, right? So what's the dismiss? No one can catch as well, which makes caught much bigger. Like nobody can catch. Yeah, just that's what I would say. Like there's money to be made on dismissal methods in women's cricket, and I don't think you need to do that much work.
I think it's been very hard to chase under lights because the dew has come in. I think a little bit of dew has come in, but not enough to make the ball hard to bowl. And I think what it's done is it's allowed for the ball to skid on a little bit more. And in women's cricket, skidding onto the stumps is a really big problem because almost every bowler hits the stumps every ball. And so if you miss anything, you're a chance of bowled or LBW almost all the time. So I would say this, if a team is chasing 115 and you get really good odds, I would probably always back the defending bowling team because at one stage they will probably come back into that game. I think it's was it the South Africa game against West Indies, which was in the daytime, which may be one of the few that we haven't seen that of. But I agree with Rob, and I really think you need to look at later on in the game, bowled and LBWs. I think gets even higher for 2 reasons. One, the women are struggling to catch because they're not used to catching at night because most of their games are generally in daytime. And 2, the lights in the UAE are a little bit different than some of the lights in other cricket nations. And I think Cricinfo might have written an article about that. The Ring of Fire lights are really, really tough once the ball goes up high. And you watch it and you can see it. Every time the ball goes up, I just assume it's going to be dropped. The really hot, the sky is at the moment.
Yeah.
And we've all seen some tournaments like that before. But I think it's particularly because the women are not used to those environments as much. And you've got to remember that, again, those are the sorts of things that you can look at when you're trying to make as much money as Rob Barron does.
Yeah, you too could make £10 a week on cricket betting. But just a very quick one. Bowled gets way more likely at the end than LBW does because they start trying to score off every ball rather than block it. So when they're blocking, back LBW, and when they're trying to score off the balls that are all aiming at the bottom of middle stump, back bowled.
And I would say
you're welcome.
There are no wide Yorkers in women's cricket. It's really rare to see a wide Yorker. So in men's cricket, you quite often don't back bowled at the end, right? Because everyone's bowling wide of the stumps. Whereas in women's cricket, especially the spinners, they're just going for the stumps over and over again. And if you look at the teams who've had success so far, it's the teams who've managed to keep the stumps in play. Like Pakistan's win over Sri Lanka was just, they kept the stumps in play and Sri Lanka didn't. Anyway, that's us here on Cricket 8. That is Rob Barron. I am Jarrod Kimber. Thank you to everyone in the comments. If you are in the comments and you've not subscribed yet, what is your damage? Please subscribe. I don't know. That's probably not the best way of putting it, Rob, but please subscribe here. But also, if you can subscribe on any of the podcast platforms, if you like to listen that way. But we'll be back again next week for more of this kind of thing here on Cricket8.
Remember to support us by subscribing and sharing, but also signing up at Cricket8.com, where live scorecards cover 8,000 matches a year with advanced visual details.